There's so much about freedom and individual responsibility, that individual relationship with the Lord, that makes Christianity and liberty uniquely, I think, of all the major religions. If you are to have that free choice in your relationship with God, to do the things He wants you to do, there must be a free choice there. And that's where liberty and Christianity, to my mind, but they are very closely linked.
Welcome again to another episode in the Let People Prosper show. My name is Dr. Vance Ginn. I hope you're having a prosperous day. Well, today I'm thrilled to welcome one of the fiercest defenders of economic liberty out there, and it's none other than Iain Murray. Iain, welcome to the Let People Prosper show.
It's great to be with you today, Vance.
Well, I'm looking forward to our conversation. We've got a lot to talk about. Before we get into that, though, let me go ahead and read your bio that I have here for the audience, and then we'll jump right into it. So, Iain Murray is Vice President for Strategy at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, where he directs the Center for Economic Freedom and has been a tireless advocate for limited government, sound money, and free market reform across labor, trade, energy, and other areas. He's also a prolific author who, if you haven't read The Socialist Temptation, Stealing You Blind, or The Really Inconvenient Truths, you're missing some of the sharpest arguments out there for why freedom works and big government doesn't. Born in the UK, as you might suspected, and now living in Virginia, Iain brings a global perspective, a love of liberty, and one of the most incisive minds in the movement. We've crossed paths over the years through CEI, freedom, conservatism, and more, and I'm excited to have him on the Let People Prosper show to talk about how we defend markets, reject the socialist drift, and keep the flame of freedom alive. So, with all that great stuff going on, Iain, let me go ahead and ask you the first question I do all the guests. Why do you do what you do every day?
Well, I grew up in a country where the flame of freedom was sputtering, shall we say. Britain in the 1970s which dates me, was not a particularly happy place. It was essentially a democratic socialist country. Nationalized industries ran the show. The labor unions, trade unions, were in 10 Downing Street dictating policy to the Prime Minister. And as a result of this, you just had no choice in anything. I remember going with my parents to the Electricity Board showroom and the British Telecom showroom to see the choice of two phones that you could have installed at the convenience of the General Post Office. So this was bad enough. But then, I came to a political awakening very early on when the coal miners, Britain ran on coal in those days. That was what powered the power stations. The coal miners went on strike, and as a result, the power stations shut down, and I had to do my homework by candlelight. And that really brought home to me that there was something very, very wrong with this system. And so a couple of years later, Margaret Thatcher suddenly appeared, and I thought, yes, this woman she's saying exactly the right things. She's harking back to Britain's great years as the mother of the free, a free country. She's going to try and bring that back. I'm on board with that, and that's how that inspiration has stayed with me throughout my career.
Wow. And I remember, seeing things of Margaret Thatcher where she held up the road to serfdom and said, "This is what we believe." I loved that.
Oh, very, very much so. The great thing about Margaret Thatcher was that she wasn't just a politician. She was an intellectual as well. She read everything. Very like Ronald Reagan, he read everything, and she had some really sharp minds behind her. Sir Keith Joseph was basically a think tank head who was in her cabinet. He founded something called the Centre for Policy Studies, which is still going today, still doing great work today. And she was very close to the Institute Institute of Economic Affairs, Lord Harris of Highcroft, Arthur Selden, people who were really thinking the unthinkable in Britain in those days. And so, she really knew her onions.
Yeah, yeah. And it was interesting, too, across the seas or across the pond, you also had Reagan at the same time, who, this kind of magical combination of freedom and free markets and everything else going in a good direction. We're going to talk about how some of that has veered off course over time, but it really was a remarkable time. When did you come to the U.S.? When did you arrive here?
Well, I like to tell people that I helped privatize the British rail system and then fled the country. So that was in 96, 97.
Okay.
That we privatized British Rail in 96. I privatized myself out of a job, got a decent redundancy settlement as a result. I was no longer going to have that job for life in the civil service. And at the same time, my ex-fiancée and I, who was American, had been getting in the process of getting back together, having a long distance relationship in the days before the internet was a little difficult, as you can imagine. But we were making it work, and so I decided to throw everything into everything I owned into one suitcase and come over here, tackle the legal immigration system, and been here ever since.
Wow! All right, yeah, well, good. And when did you join CEI?
I joined CEI in 2005. Fred Smith, the founder of CEI, was able to find a role for me, and I came on board working initially mostly on energy and the environment.
And at CEI, if the audience don't know, they should definitely go check it out. I'll make sure to put more in the show notes page. But it's a lot about freedom and individual liberty and everything else. But how do you like to explain what you do at CEI, but also what CEI does in general?
Well, CEI focuses on the hidden issue. A lot of people do tax, a lot of people do social policy, a lot of people do the budget, a lot of people do defense. We look at regulation. And that fourth branch of the state, that unconstitutional fourth branch of the state, the administrative state, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, and how they run our lives. Fred Smith, our founder, was very concerned that environmental regulation was running rampant across the United States and was stopping prosperity by basically just saying to people, no, you can't do that. And when people ask why, I say, well, the environment.
Yeah.
It's a good catch-all. But it's not just environmental regulation. Environmental regulation, energy regulation, they're really burdensome. Lots of other areas that are burdensome as well. Financial regulation, labor and employment regulation. That's a big reason we can't get anything built in this country. Technology regulation, trying to keep the technologies of the future walled off so that we can actually develop them rather than stifle them in the cradle. So we do a lot across a lot of issue areas, and in fact, we sort of bring this all together. My colleague Wayne Cruz has for almost 30 years now been doing his annual snapshot of the regulatory state, which he calls 10,000 commandments. And if it was only 10,000 commandments, we'd be in a lot better state.
Amen. That's right. It's great work overall that y'all been doing and that you've been doing there and others. And, the regulations are, it's just a huge cost that I think people do not understand. It really has become the fourth branch of government when you have all these regulators and bureaucrats and everything else. And we hear some people that are starting to ratchet on them and trying to bring some down. But that really does restrict the amount of freedom that we have, the liberty, whether it be zoning regulations and housing and everything else. There's just so many factors at this that even goes into immigration, right? Do you also work on some immigration issues as well?
We used to work on immigration issues, but our immigration analysts, Alex Noastra and Dave Beer, are now doing great work at the Cato Institute, and we let them cook. Yeah,
and I've had Alex on the podcast as well. We had a great discussion, and he's always fiery and gets fired up, and he's fantastic. And Iain, what are some of the main issues that you've been working on here lately?
One of the I think one thing that listeners really want to hear is about something that we call regulatory dark matter, which when it comes to regulations, they're not quite laws, but they're supposed to go through a procedure that's a bit like law, which is, you have a notice and comment period, so that the regulator says, this is what we're planning to do. What do you think of it? And the public comes back and says, that's an absolutely crazy idea. Why are you trying to do that? And the regulators say, okay, well, we'll modify it a little bit. That tends to be what happens. But there's another thing called that we call regulatory dark matter, which is that the regulators issue guidance documents and bulletins and circulars and so on, all of which go out to the regulated industry and basically say to the regulated industry, this is how we're going to be enforcing this regulation. If you don't follow this guidance, you're in trouble. And that's how we got things like Operation Choke Point, which is something I worked on a decade ago, in which we're finally seeing the fruits of all the work we did then. Operation Choke Point was basically the beginning of debanking. And so that all came about as a result of a circular from the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation about something called reputational risk. And last week we saw the president issue his order on debanking, which said, no, you cannot, you regulators cannot use reputational risk as a means to threaten banks. And so banks, you don't have to debank anybody because of the supposed reputational risk. So that's something that we've been working on for a decade, and we've seen some great results thanks to President Trump.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I think it is important for us to say positive things when we can. And that certainly was a positive executive order. And I think, Iain, you mentioned you started in 2005, so you've been there for about 20 years now at CEI. And you mentioned how that particular issue took about a decade. Us who are in this think tank world or policy world, we want things done right away. But of course, we know that's not how it works under whether it's Congress or even the executive branch. And we may have one president like Trump that comes in and does some good debanking executive order, but then the next president doesn't. Or Congress doesn't get everything in line. And also Congress will have a lot of vague terms or laws that they pass that then gives the regulators a lot more freedom and flexibility, especially under the Chevron deference, which fortunately was overturned. Hopefully, Congress will start to take some of that power back. But how do you go through this, dealing with regulations of how long this stuff can take? Because it's not like it gets the sexy sort of media attention like spending and taxes, especially tax cuts do, to just keep going with it. There seems to be something else that's maybe driving you of really making sure that gets done at some point in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long, hard battle. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Actually, it's not so much a marathon as the Persian Wars. It takes a long time to get something done, especially, as you say, if you have to go through Congress, which just much prefers. The reason we have the administrative state in the first place is because Congress didn't want to deal with the nasty business of its constituents coming back and saying, "Hey, you passed this law. That was stupid." They'll give it to. They'll say to regulators, "You should do something wonderful. There's something that's really good," and then the regulators do the stupid thing instead, and the regulators are insulated. They can't be removed at the next congressional election. So that's the way it works. Congress just delegates all the messy business to the regulators, and the regulators aren't answerable to the electorate except via the president, and so. That means that regulations just have this sticking power. There are some regulations that are essentially almost constitutional now, because they've been around for so long. Labor and employment regulation in particular has this problem.
And with your work on socialism, I wanted to dive into that for a little bit. there's a movement. I mean, we've seen this on the progressive left for forever, is that they wanted to move more close in that direction. But we're seeing this more and more on the right. With the national conservatives, the populists, and everything else, there's this big movement of top-down control. I mean, whether you include tariffs in there or other types of regulations or banning things and everything else, if we just have the right people in charge, then we can get the right things done. And it seems like we have a lot of history and economic theory that would push back on that. But what has been your thinking on this and in your writing?
Well, I've mentioned the founder of CEI, Fred Smith. He's a huge influence on me, and he always said about politics that the voter. You might think the voter's stupid, but they're not stupid because they're stupid, he would say. They're stupid because they're smart. And if you try to make them smart, you're being stupid. Most people don't engage with politics at the level of looking up aggregate GDP numbers and trade flows and labor and employment statistics, even though those are the big things of in the news today. They tend to engage with politics on the level of values. And in essence, there are three main value groups in America. Cultural anthropologists have looked at this time and again, and they say that there are three main value groups. There's people who value fairness first, egalitarians. There's people who value community and tradition. The cultural anthropologists call them hierarchists, but I prefer just to call them traditionalists. And then there are the people who value liberty first, the libertarians. So you have to make your argument to all three of these groups if you're going to succeed. And one of the problems is that two of those groups value things above liberty. So that's where the sort of socialist and or traditionalist order-based thinking comes from. They think that if you have somebody in control, as you say, then that's the best way to deliver fairness. Somebody can cut down the tall poppies and make sure that everybody's equal. That's fair. Somebody's there to keep out the people who would disturb community. Somebody to preserve those jobs that your ancestors had, and so you should have as well. That's where this sort of strongman controller aspect comes from. That's why you see charismatic demagogues on the left and the right. And it's only that third group, the libertarian group, that really stands up and says, hang on a minute, that isn't the best way to do things. If we just let people be free, let people prosper, then that's the way. That's the way to secure those other virtues, those other values. So these three value groups are always in contention, and they all speak different languages. There's a great economist called Arnold Kling who wrote a wonderful book called The Three Languages of Politics, and that's basically about the same divide. So unless you're speaking those three languages at the same time, and that can be pretty difficult, then you're probably not going to win the battle. Yeah, no, that's well said there, Iain. And I love that book by Arnold Kling. It's over here on my bookshelf. And it is tough, though, to bring all this together, because those values, those morals and everything else are so important. And I think we're getting into this discussion nowadays from many on the right who want to cast out free market capitalism. I think that they believe that it doesn't provide the moral
superiority or the moral path for the future because it's only about material things. It's not about other aspects. And from my perspective, and probably yours too, from the more libertarian, classical liberal view, is that free market capitalism allows for you to have those morals. It allows for you to have your religion or whatever else that it is in a way that no other economic system that we have so far allows. And so the more they move to socialism, the more control over our liberty that we have. So then we can't serve whatever God or whatever religion we want to and everything else. I happen to be a Christian, so that's the one that I want. But I don't want to put... And the other part about me that I was talking to some friends about the other day, and I wonder what your thoughts are on this, is, to me, as a Christian, just putting that out there, is I believe that the change to Christianity is through the heart, not through the mind. And many other religions are like this too. So I can't quite grasp what the direction is they want us to go if it's not in that. But do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, the wonderful comic writer Frank Fleming actually put out a little video today when he looked back at Samuel, the book of Samuel, and how Samuel warned the Israelites not to have a king because he'd take their stuff and exploit them and push them around. And the Israelites said, no, we want a king. And Frank summarizes this as two things. One, God is a libertarian. Yeah. And two, even he couldn't make the argument work. Yeah. So, there's so much about freedom and individual responsibility, and that individual relationship with the Lord that makes Christianity and liberty uniquely, I think, of all the major religions, so closely linked. And if you are to have that free choice in your relationship with God, to do the things He wants you to do, in my opinion, to do the things He wants you to do, you must there must be a free choice there, and that's where liberty comes in, and that's where liberty and Christianity, to my mind, and obviously I'm not speaking for CEI here. Sure, I'm speaking for myself personally, but they are very closely linked. Yeah,
no, well put there. When you were going back a little bit to the UK versus DC or the United States and everything else, and thinking about regulation and bureaucracy and other things that have happened over time. We also had the Brexit and things of that nature. Where do you see the UK versus the US as far as regulations and maybe the direction of where things are going?
Yeah, I mean that's a tricky one. Okay. The main impetus behind Brexit was to get rid of the control of Brussels over so much of your life. That's why the Brexit campaign said its tagline was "Take back control." The British people would decide these things. We'd get rid of all the regulations which were just imposed on Britain, and people would be the country would once again move towards that freedom direction that it had been so important in its history. And it didn't happen that way. Brexit took so long to happen because the Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, said, who'd called the referendum, said, "I'm not seeing this through. You're stuck with it." And then Theresa May, who became the next Prime Minister, was basically a Remainer. She wanted Britain to remain in, so she cut these terrible deals with the European Union, and then eventually she was forced out. And a true believer in Brexit, Boris Johnson, came to power, and he got Brexit done, and then instantly COVID happened, and that turned everything on its head. And as a result, the benefits of Brexit were wasted. The ability to deregulate massively and get rid of the European Convention on Human Rights, which is what has led to some ridiculous judicial decisions in the United Kingdom. Get rid of that. It acts almost like a constitution when Britain doesn't have a written constitution, famously. And people don't like that. There were all sorts of opportunities that, thanks to COVID and then Boris being kicked out of office over a slice of cake, one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard of, and then his successor came in and was basically a centrist statist, and that made them incredibly unpopular, and as a result, a Labour Party, which is also incredibly unpopular, got in with a thumping majority of 200 seats.
Wow.
So they can basically do anything they want for the next 4 years. They're probably going to get wiped out at the next election, just like the Conservatives were. But they're in power for 4 years, like it or not, such as the size of their majority. So we saw the benefits of Brexit wasted, and now we've got to this situation where a succession of governments, both Conservative and Labour, who believe in micromanaging the British economy, the British way of life, British speech especially. That's the big issue at the moment. You can get thrown in jail for 2 years for sending out a nasty tweet. But I was just reading today of someone who was found guilty of sexual assault, who was let out because a custodial sentence would not be in the national interest, whereas putting somebody in jail for 2 years for a tweet is.
Wow.
So you've reached ridiculous situations like this, and the British people have had enough. And if you look at the polls, they're all saying that the Reform, a party that currently only has 5 MPs, is going to sweep into power at the next election with a mandate to change all of this. So it'll be interesting to see if they can hold that up over the next 3 or 4 years. But it looks like the British people have finally had enough.
Yeah, wow. And their economy has been suffering in the meantime, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and that's well, not entirely, but to a large part due to a ridiculous obsession with what they call net zero, which is reducing emissions, carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions to net zero. And so, as a result, energy prices have skyrocketed, and it's virtually impossible to power anything. Intensive industry, energy-intensive industry, is just crippled. The average household has seen their energy bills just go through the roof. You can't install. You actually legally can't install air conditioning in new built buildings.
Wow.
All of these things have contributed to the British economy just stagnating. If you look at it before 2008, the financial crisis, it was basically on track with the United States, and there's been a massive divergence since.
Wow.
And now a regional manager of Buc-ee's here in the States is earning more than senior civil servants in the UK.
Wow. Well, I love Buc-ee's. I go there often here in Texas. So that's a good reference there. It's sad to see. I mean, I hoped after Brexit, it seemed like it was a great opportunity to break free from what's happening, as you said, in Brussels and in Europe, because they were heading down these bad routes. And I was hoping that the UK would take more of a US sort of direction. And maybe they will after the next election. But you're right, over the next 4 years, that's just not going to happen. What have you seen as far as some of the global trade issues? Because I know here in the United States, there's been a huge discussion. I know there's some discussion about having a deal with the UK, although these deals deals seem to be more of frameworks, not really any specifics or anything yet. But I know as far as regulation, you think about global trade and our freedom and liberty to trade whoever we want to mutually benefit has really been pushed to the wayside for a number of reasons. I kind of think it goes back to our freedom, the national conservatives, the populist sort of rhetoric that's out there. But it almost too, Iain, I guess to give them some credit is that there has been this long argument that, the Rust Belt was hollowed out by capitalism, by free trade. And, I've talked about with some other folks, had Brian Riley on the show here recently and others, Scott Lincecum and others talking about, well, you've also got to think about what the states were doing with their policies and the union pressure and everything else that contributed to many of those businesses in the manufacturing sector, not just leaving the country, but first going to the Sun Belt, to Texas, where I live, or other places, and then they decided to go elsewhere. But there's been such this rhetoric and what I think is bad economics, but this rhetoric that's pushing us to think that free market capitalism is the problem, free trade is the problem, and so we've got to control where these dollars are going. And even recently, President Trump has mentioned, these deals that some countries are going to buy a certain amount of our investments or a certain amount of goods in order for this agreement to go through. Just seems like more heavy-handed sort of top-down approach of regulations and trade regulations in particular. But what do you think about that with the trade in general? But also, what have you seen maybe with what's happening with the U.S. and U.K. and some of the trade there? If you have any comments.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, the most important thing is that when we talk about the communities that were hit by changes brought about by free trade, it's a failure of adaptation. That's what Scott Lincecum and others have looked at this in detail. They came to that conclusion that it is actually those regulations, especially labor and employment regulations, that stifled the sort of innovative change that would have happened in as a result of trade. But the thing is, trade is only a small part of this change. David Autor and his colleagues who came up with a study about the China shock, who said that their upper bound for the number of jobs lost to trade was 2 million over the lifetime of the China shock. That's an upper bound, probably more likely 1 million. A lot of jobs, but that pales in significance compared with the number of jobs who are lost every year, not over a long period of time like the China shock. Every year, 5 million jobs are lost every year as a result of change and technological innovation and just the general churn of the economy.
Just like market activity happening, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what happens. Firms go under, new firms are created. We don't have buggy whip manufacturers anymore, but boy, do we have a wonderful car industry, mostly in right-to-work states in the South. Mm-hmm. It was often a conscious choice by communities, especially in the northern Rust Belt, to keep these regulations in place, even when trade was doing what it does and changing the way the economy operates. They wanted basically to pickle themselves in aspic, and so as a result, they've suffered ongoing ill effect. A lot of communities didn't do that. Greensboro, South Carolina, great example. They adapted. They allowed BMW to come in, build a new car manufacturing plant there, and brought with it lots of ancillary businesses. Place became a boomtown. It in many ways it's really a failure of adaptation.
Yeah. And you see the same things probably in the UK and elsewhere, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The UK is just hamstrung by its, especially its energy policies, as I mentioned, but also, its Labour policies were actually pretty good for quite a while. But getting over that energy issue is a big one there. But the US has always had, well, not always, but in recent years has had a trade surplus with the UK. They buy far more of our stuff than we do of theirs, and that's partly because the UK is, for all its problems, it's still a rich economy, so it can afford to buy our stuff.
Yeah.
You don't see that the same with other countries, like African countries and so on. Mm-hmm. They aren't able to buy all our stuff because we produce really high end goods, and they're not very wealthy, and so they have a trade deficit. And so I think when you look at it, trade surpluses and deficits that way, it becomes apparent that trade deficits aren't necessarily a problem. They're often just an indicator of level of economic development. Previous administrations realized this when they realized that they could get rid of foreign aid, which tends to, Lord Bauer of the Institute of Economic Affairs was pointing this out back in the 80s. Foreign aid tends to go into the pockets of corrupt leaders and warlords, gets spent on things that foreign aid is not meant to be spent on. So, back during the Clinton and Bush administrations, they realized that replacing foreign aid with trade, so trade, not aid, was actually the way to help these countries develop, and so that became a great tool of American soft power, and at the same time, it did an amazing thing, which was lift so many people out of poverty. So that's the really good side of trade. And if you're a Christian, as we were discussing earlier, you've got to put some weight on that. And if you're not putting weight on that aspect of trade, then perhaps you should have a good hard think.
Yeah, no, well put there. And the show name "Let People Prosper," I talked about this, but prosperity isn't just material things. I think it's, it's psychologically, spiritually, socially. I mean, there's so many other factors that go into that. And so it kind of gets a bad rap sometime, whether it's capitalism or something else we mentioned before, but it really is about that freedom to do as you please. And, there's some talk about local control and stuff like this in politics sometimes. And to me, it's always the local control comes back to the individual, the person, and making sure that they're as free and prosperous as possible. And that's one thing that I've been excited about as we're wrapping up some here now is looking at the freedom conservative movement. And what we've seen is it grow and over time, and had the first event earlier this year, as far as a public event it goes, and there's just a lot more movement in that space to fight back, I think, for the NatCons and the other directions that have been going, where it seemed to me more like the freedom conservative, Iain, was really the conservatism from the old days, that they've really tried to change it now to something else that looks a lot more like progressivism than it really is conservatism. And, in with your work too on the environment and energy, conservatives and libertarians, we have a view of stewardship of the environment. I mean, I want to leave God's world better off than where I found it. But I think that's done through markets. It's not done through regulations and everything else. And because oftentimes the government failures tend to be as costly, if not more costly, than any perceived market failure that may exist. And it seems to me like the freedom conservative movement and pushes understand that, and I hope can gain more traction. But where do you kind of hope that we are moving towards, Iain, for the future, and anything else you'd like to add about an environment or anything along those lines?
Yeah, my first book, The Really Inconvenient Truths, had 7 environmental catastrophes that the left won't tell you about because they helped cause them. And the one I finished with was the greatest environmental disaster of all in the modern world. Forget global warming or anything like that. It's the destruction of the Aral Sea. And why was this done? Why has that huge sea just disappeared from Central Asia? It's because the Soviets had a centrally planned economy. And they decided that they were going to divert the water that fed the Aral Sea to help create cotton, because cotton fields, white gold as they called it, throughout Central Asia. So it was a politically favoured industry, and central planning just led to this massive economic disaster. Capitalism had nothing whatsoever to do with it.
Wow.
So I think that's a great example of how deciding that industries should be favoured, deciding that national efforts need to be put into supporting these industries. They can all lead to massive unintended disasters. Job losses, stagnating technology are just the start of it. In the end, it can lead to environmental catastrophe.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, it's been a great conversation today, Iain. I really appreciate all the work that you're doing and continue to do. I know we'll continue to see each other and work on these in many ways. But God bless you and your family, and thank you for being on the Let People Prosper show.
Bless you too, Vance. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you so much, Iain. And for the audience, I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Be sure to subscribe, share with your friends and family. They too need to learn more about the cost of regulations, the cost of our freedoms, whenever we give too much power to elected folks or the unelected and regulators as well, as this is something that we really need to take on as much as possible to ultimately let people prosper. There's that as well. Remember, you can find more information at vanceginn.com or get all the show notes at vanceginn.substack.com. And until next time, God bless you and let people prosper.